Britain and Ireland are home to some of the strongest psychedelic mushrooms on the whole of the planet. We have a mushroom called the Liberty Cap mushroom, and the reason it's known as one of the most potent and strongest is because the amount of psilocybin in the mushroom by weight of the mushroom. So this isn't to say it's the most profound and the best mushroom in the world, it just literally has a lot of psilocybin in the tiny little mushroom that it is. And I'm from Wales, a country in Britain, or Pretani, which is what I like to call this place now. And these specific mushrooms cover the valleys every single autumn, and I've been picking them for the last 10 years. If you haven't heard of Wales before, you can picture Lord of the Rings, the Arthurian legends. So the Elvish people in Lord of the Rings, the elves, their names, their language is inspired by Wales. Tolkien was massively inspired by places all over the world, but Wales is one of them. So if you think of Hobbiton and you think of the Shire, I studied in Herefordshire, I come from Glamorganshire. These are the Shires. And I have to say that because when I shared a video like this on Instagram, I had people arguing about where Tolkien was inspired from. No, he was inspired by this place, that place, here. Like, he was inspired by many different places and cultures. So this particular video is going to be a brief explanation on how my psychedelic experiences resonate and reflect that of ancient Celtic or British mythology, especially an aspect of Welsh mythology. And I will also be discussing why today we do not have a shamanic practice. We do not have elders and shamans who have kept the lineage of a psychedelic mushroom tradition like in many other parts of the world. And I will be looking back at a time as to where we might have had a connection to these mushroom spirits and they weren't like illegal. So this subject is so vast, this is just one aspect of a longer series. And today we're going to go into the Celtic Otherworld. But it is not really the Celtic Otherworld because the term Celtic doesn't really describe much at all. I'll go into that a little bit. The term Celtic describes a lot of different countries over a long period of time. So it's not a great word to describe anything at all really, unless you're talking about a long period of time. But traditionally, thinking about the Celtic Otherworld, we can think to the Otherworld as described in Irish literature and Irish folklore and Irish mythology. Now, I'm not Irish, I'm Welsh, and I'm going to talk about a place called Annwn, or Annwn, which in Welsh mythology is the inner deep world, like the base layer of this reality in which everything manifests from. And for the Welsh, there was a word called awen, and awen is this magical energetic source that literally kind of translates to divine inspiration. And this awen comes from this other world, or this annwn, this inner deep world. And this annwn describes a world within, and this awen is like this inspirational divine source that emerges from this place within that we can tap into. And from my experience, especially when being with and communicating with the spirits of the psychedelic mushroom in Wales, Annwn describes like an inner subconscious world that we all share. But we will all interpret these things differently because they are beyond the human experience, which is like the psychedelic experience. You have that experience and you can't articulate it with words because it's beyond humanity. So when I started studying ancient Welsh folklore or Celtic folklore and mythology, I saw stories that described my psychedelic experience. So Annwn, this other world in Welsh mythology, is more fruitful and glorious and joyful. It's full of love, it's full of romance, and it's full of eternal youth. And within Welsh stories, you get a lot of shape-shifting of animals, which is a common theme within the psychedelic experience, but it is also something that comes from shamanic cultures around the world. And these aren't just cultures where they're using the plant medicine, but the psychedelic state is often associated with a shifting and a shape-shifting of the inner conscious to kind of merge with the world around, whether you're merging with a tree or you're merging with a bird or you're merging with a fox. And there are many, many stories, including ones from people I know, where they have experienced the psychedelic mushroom and shape-shifted into different animal spirits or been able to communicate with different animal spirits. And this connects to Welsh mythology because there are stories of these magical characters in Welsh mythology where they are shape-shifting through different animals. And one of those stories is the story of the birth of Taliesin. Now I'm going to go into a video that's specific on the story of Taliesin because the word Taliesin means shining brow or radiant brow. And when I had my psychedelic experience, my third eye opened. But let's go back to Annwn, or this other world. One of the main things is how time doesn't work the same in this space. Time and space don't quite exist in the same way that they do in the human world when looking at these stories. These stories aren't just myths and legends and folk tales from the imagination. I have got books that describe real experiences from people who lived and witnessed things such as fairies, goblins, gnomes and pixies. Now, if you've heard of a man called Terence McKenna, you will know exactly what I'm on about. Terence McKenna is a bit like the pioneer of the mushroom consciousness within the Western society. And in the New Age spiritual movements, you get a lot of people talking about their psychedelic experiences where they're communicating with pixies and elf-like creatures. And on mushrooms especially, it can feel like you're communicating with an entity that's a bit like a fairy, and it can even look like a fairy, like not like a little fairy with wings, but like a pixie or a gnome. Like these creatures that we can all visualize are often seen under the influence and with the meeting of the psilocybin mushroom from Britain. Terence McKenna even talks about this. Terence McKenna has spoken of this like many times. He wrote the introduction for a book by a man called Walter Evans Wentz. So Walter Evans Wentz went around Wales and interviewed the oldest people and asked them what their grandparents knew about fairies. And this book was written in the early 1900s. But aside from the similarities that I see between my own psychedelic experiences and Welsh folklore mythology and stories from people of these lands, I think it's strange that the mushrooms are not mentioned at all, actually, within Welsh written history. And some people will say, well, that's because we never ate them, but that's just like a ridiculous idea. Like, no. And the reason that it's ridiculous to think that the ancient people didn't eat them and experience them is because they grow everywhere in the autumn, and even the animals today enjoy them. So perhaps this knowledge was purposefully kept out of our scriptures because our scriptures were actually written by Christian monks. All of the writing that we have about our history here in Wales was not by us or our people. It wasn't by our spiritual leaders or our shamanic leaders. It was by Christian monks who were very imaginative in their writings. It was more like stories as opposed to like factual information about our people and our sacred lives. And the mushroom doesn't preserve itself well through archaeological studies, so it is hard to find this through archaeology. And if you wanted to go and find evidence, you'd have to spend so much money, like there would need to be so much funding and studying to find the evidence. And in today's world, with the way we treat these sacred plants, no one's going to be funding that. This isn't happening anytime soon, which is why I'm talking about it right now. I'm talking about how my experiences seem to reflect stories from my ancient past. Just remember, all of this is based on my theories, my interpretations, and I'd like to know what you think about it. Does the Annwn, the inner deep world where divine inspiration comes through, remind you perhaps of your psychedelic experiences? Have you ever witnessed or communicated with any fairy-like beings or entities through your journeys into the psychedelic realm? As I said, this is just the start of a series that is very vast and very big. Not many people are talking about this, so if you'd like to collaborate on a video or comment or have a chat with me, please do. I hope this has been a cheeky little teaser and it has sparked something in you. If so, please send me a message and I will be back to share more soon. Arwen, guys. Mwah.